Hi guys, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be solving the May-June 24 paper 32 exam that happened today on the 13th of June. And if you're new on my channel or haven't subscribed already, then kindly subscribe and hit the bell icon for regular updates. Now let's get started. Question number 1 says the table shows the total utility that is gained by a consumer from the consumption of water. Right, and you have the total total utility is going up that we can see, and the consumption of the bottles is also going up. And to answer this question, it's asking what can be concluded. We need to calculate the marginal utility first for each unit that we have been consuming. And so we know that marginal utility is a change in total utility that results from the consumption of an additional unit of a good. And so it follows that for the first bottle, the marginal utility would be 30, and so it would be 10 for the second, and then 8, 6, and 4, right? And if you look at the answer options, the first option says the marginal utility is increasing as consumption goes up, which is wrong because we see from the calculation that marginal utility is going down, so this option is incorrect. Well, option B says the consumer cannot switch expenditure to another product to increase total utility. Now, we can't really conclude this directly from the given data. It would require us with more information about other products and their utilities as well. So we can't really mark this the correct answer because we have insufficient data. Well, part C says the marginal utility of the third unit is 8, and so it is correct. When we consume the third unit, the additional utility that we gain from consuming the third unit is 8. Right, and so that makes it C the correct answer. Question number 2 says a consumer has $100 to spend on two products X and Y, and the budget line shows different possible combinations of X and Y that can be purchased when all income is spent. If the price of product Y goes up to 10, what is the maximum number of X and Y that the consumer can now purchase? Very simple question. We know that the budget line shows different possible combinations of good X and good Y that can be purchased with your given income and prices when all the consumer's income is spent. And so the equation of the budget line would go something like M, let's say total, which represents total income, equals to price of X times quantity of X plus price of Y times quantity of Y. And so since the product Y's price is going up, the budget line would pivot or rotate inwards. And so if we would now want to see the maximum number of Y that we can buy, right, initially we're buying the maximum number of Y that we can end up buying is 20 if all income is spent on buying Y. And the maximum number of X that we can buy is 10 if all income is spent on buying X. And by the way, since the price of Y is going up to $10, we can still end up buying the same number of X if all income is spent on X, right? But the amount of Y that we can buy is now going to be less. And so it follows that if $100 is your income and all is spent on buying Y, which is the price of Y is $10, so it's 10Y plus this should be 0, and now the maximum number of Y that you can end up buying is 10, and so C should be the correct answer, that is 10 units of X and 10 units of Y. The next question number 3 says which combination of costs and benefits will lead to an increase in your net social cost. Okay, so basically net social cost is calculated as the difference between your social benefits. The difference between your social costs and your social benefits. And so net social cost would be private cost plus external cost, which just sums up to social costs minus your private benefits plus your external benefits, right, which is your social benefits. And so if they're saying that which combination will lead to an increase in your net social cost, which means that your net social cost is going up, so net social cost could go up if your social cost goes up or your social benefit goes down. Or let's say nothing happens to social cost but your social benefit goes down. And so it follows that if you look at option number A, it says that your private benefits and external benefits are falling, that together makes your social benefit to go down, and nothing is happening to your social cost, so it stays constant, and overall your net social cost in this case should go up, right? And so that makes A the correct answer. The next question number 4 says a firm increases its output starting from 0. How will this affect its short-term marginal cost, average total cost, and average cost, fixed cost curve? And so now we know, to solve this MCQ, we need to see how, the short-term costs behave as you increase output, right, from zero. And so we know that the marginal cost is your additional cost that is incurred because of producing another unit of output or an extra unit of output. But your average total cost is just total cost divided by the number of units and that you produce, and your average fixed cost is the fixed cost divided by the number of units that you produce. Now we know that the marginal cost, typically decreases initially due to increasing marginal returns as better utilization of fixed factors take place, right? But then it eventually rises due to diminishing marginal returns. So marginal cost should initially fall, then rise, should be either A or B. And if you look at average total cost, we know that average total cost initially decreases as fixed costs are spread over more units, but it eventually increases then as the rising marginal cost is going to pull up the average total cost up, right? But then average fixed cost is always going to be decreasing as output increases because the fixed cost would be spread over more units of output, and then that follows that the correct answer should be A, right? The next question number 5 says, assuming the absence of price controls on which industry is an individual firm least likely to be able to alter the price at which it sells its product. And then they have given 4 different industries, and in order to basically come to a conclusion for this MCQ, we need to identify the industry where an individual firm would have the least ability to alter the price at which it's selling its product. And this would generally occur in a perfectly competitive market where firms are price takers, right? And so if you look at these answer options, if you look at air transportation, air transportation is a large industry, and it suggests an oligopoly because air transportation industry would have few large firms that have some control over pricing, right? Although they would be influenced by competitive pressure, but this suggests an oligopoly. Well, a hairdressing is a typical example of monopolistic competition, consisting of many firms that are offering, slightly differentiated services. And individual firms in a hairdressing would also have some ability to set prices based on their brand, quality, or maybe service differentiation. So the correct answer for this should be wheat farming, because it's a classic example of a perfectly competitive market where there are many small farmers producing homogeneous products. So again, no single farmer would then be able to influence the market price, and hence they would be price takers, making D the correct answer. The next question number 6 says, a firm has the choice between 5 levels of output. The table shows total revenue of production at each output level. The firm could easily sell whatever output it produces. The firm decides to produce 4,000 units, and what is the firm's aim? Now for this question, we need to first calculate the profit for each output level to understand why the firm is choosing 4,000 units. And if we calculate the profit, that is total revenue minus total cost, what we see is that we'll have a profit of 2,000, then 6,000 here, and then 5,000, again 5,000 and 0, right? For 5,000 units of output, we don't have any profit. And so now, we can clearly see that the firm is maximizing its profits at the output level of 2,000, because over here at 2,000 units, it gives the highest profit of $6,000. But if you see, if the firm produces further, it produces 3,000 and 4,000 units as well, it's also, giving us some profit. It's still giving profit of 5,000. So, so we see that the firm's decision to produce 4,000 units, this 4,000 units is certainly not to maximize profits, but it still, achieves some amount of profit, that is $5,000. That is indicating that, the firm is likely sort of aiming for something else other than profit maximization. So if you look at these answer options, what we see is that the first option says to maximize profit is not, obviously the firm is not aiming there. The second says to maximize sales. And this could mean, if you're maximizing sales, it could mean maximizing the quantity that you're selling. But since the firm is choosing 4,000 units, it means that if it was maximizing, your sales, that is your quantity, then it would have maximized, it would have produced 5,000 units instead of 4,000, right? Which is the highest quantity according to the table. But then if you look at maximizing, so this is not the correct answer, B is also wrong. If you look at maximize revenue, total revenue, we know total revenue is highest. Where is total revenue highest? Total revenue is highest at 4,000 units, and therefore this is suggesting that yes, this is the particular aim as per the table, and then C should be the answer. But if you look at option number D, this is not, this to minimize average cost is not relevant here, because the question is focusing on total costs and total revenues and not average costs, right? And so it follows that C should be the correct answer. Question number 7 says the diagram shows the costs and benefits of producing steel in a free market. Which area measures deadweight loss of economic welfare? Now, the deadweight loss would arise when you produce suboptimal outcome, representing loss of welfare to society, loss of economic welfare to society. And if you look at the optimum outcome in this case would be when you're the outcome or the output level where the marginal social cost is equal to your marginal social benefits, and that would occur at output level M, right? But then if you produce more than M, what would happen is that for all the units that lie between M and N, the marginal social cost would exceed the marginal social benefits. For, let's say, for this particular unit, the marginal social cost would be more than the marginal social benefit, and this would represent your deadweight loss. And so for all these units, we can clearly see from the diagram that the marginal social cost curve is going up while the marginal social benefit is going down, which means that as you increase production beyond your M, the social cost of producing all these units goes up while social benefit of producing these units is going down. And so it means that a society is losing more than what it is benefiting, right? And so this area that is RTS measures the deadweight loss to society of overproduction, basically, of producing all this extra output that shouldn't have been produced first. It represents a misallocation of resources. You just ended up wasting your resources. So RTS represents the deadweight loss of economic welfare, right? So A is the correct answer. The next question number 8 says, what is likely to make it more difficult for a small firm to survive? And if you look at option A, it says increased preference on part of the consumers for distinctive non-standardized products. And this would actually favor small firms because, they can now cater to the niche market and provide unique products that larger firms cannot offer, right? So this is not the correct answer, while option B would again favor small firms because of falling rate of interest and they could finance their operations. And so option C says the absence of effective barriers to entry of competitors. And so if there are no effective barriers to entry, it means that new competitors could easily enter the market. And this would basically increase competition, which can make it more difficult for existing small firms to survive because, they would have to continuously compete with new entrants, which could potentially drive down prices and reducing their own market share. So 8C is the correct answer. Question number 9, the next question says a market structure in which a small number of firms face competition from potential entrants, and what does this describe? And so the correct answer for this option is contestable market, because contestable market is characterized by low barriers to entry and exit, meaning that a small number of firms can face significant competition from potential entrants. And even if they are not facing actual competition, the fact that the market is subject to potential competition, even if there are only few firms currently operating in the market, so the threat of that potential entrants can act as actual competition and can influence the behavior of these existing firms, particularly in terms of pricing and output. And so the correct answer should be option number A. And a lot of students also marked for this, what I heard from was that they marked option D, perfect competition. But this is incorrect, because you see, when you talk about perfect competition, it involves very many firms. There are huge number of firms, or they are small in size, but there are a huge number of firms, with no barriers to entry and selling identical products. And so we don't get this sort of reference from this particular question. And so it correctly describes what contestable market looks like. Hence option A is the correct answer. And for this question, a lot of students also did mark C, that is the feedback that I got, a vineyard buying an apple orchard. So vineyard is simply you planting grapes, right? For you growing grapes mainly for making wine. And so if a vineyard ends up buying an apple orchard, this is not a vertical backward integration, but this is an example of, diversification. The vineyard is diversifying. Although vineyard and an apple orchard both could be considered as, agricultural farms, but then they both are growing different things, and a vineyard is not using apples as an input for wine production, right? Because a vineyard is you're growing grapes to make wine, while an apple orchard is an apple farm, right? So a vineyard buying an apple orchard is an example of diversification. The next question number 11 says the government wants to introduce a policy that will reduce the pollution caused by production of a good. Which policy would not make use of market forces? Now, if you look at option A, a quota to limit the production. Now, a quota will use, so basically a quota would limit the quantity of a good that is produced, right? And it will also influence the market forces because, is going to limit the supply, which will ultimately affect prices and how the market behaves, right? And so this is the incorrect answer. While option number C says a tax on the production of a good. So a tax, we know that it internalizes the external cost, that is because of the pollution, by making it more expensive to produce that particular good. And again, this is using the market forces because it's altering the cost structure of the firms by increasing the costs and then, ultimately incentivizing them to reduce the pollution, to sort of lower their, tax burdens. So again, this is not the correct answer as well. And a tradable pollution, permit is, if you look at a tradable pollution permit, it allows the firms to buy and sell pollution permits, and again it creates a market for basically pollution rights, and it does uses market forces to find most cost-effective ways to reduce pollution. Hence, this will not be the correct answer. And so what we are left with is option number B. But option B is, let's see why is it the correct answer? Because a regulation is it's a ban. A regulation to ban the production of a good, it's basically prohibiting the production, and this does not involve market forces because it's just instruction. It's a command and control approach that is basically removing the good from the market altogether, and that's make B the correct answer. The next question number 12 says the table shows the annual percentage change in the output per worker employed for 4 nationalized industries before and after privatization. What can be concluded about the effect of privatization? Okay, now this is an interesting question. And so the table is showing the annual percentage change in basically the output per worker, right? And if you look at option number A, what can be concluded about the effect of privatization? It's the option A says employment fell in the railway industry. Now, if you look at what's happening, because it's saying output per worker employed, right? So output per worker employed before privatization was negative 4%, but after privatization, it goes up to 2%. And so the option A is saying employment fell in the railway industry. So, the fact that output per worker goes up in the railway industry from negative 4 to 2% after privatization is indicating an improvement or a rise in worker productivity. It's not necessarily indicating a fall in employment because there's no direct information that we have about employment levels in the table. So we can't really mark option A as the correct answer. Although yes, worker productivity is going up, but we can't really comment on the employment. We can't really comment with certainty that whether, about the employment level in the railway industry. So this is the incorrect option. Employment was unchanged in the telecommunication industry. Again, if you look at the telecommunication industry before and after privatization, we know that the output per worker in the telecommunication industry remained constant at 6%. Now this is suggesting this is output per worker, so it's suggesting a stable productivity before and after privatization. That is, your productivity is stable or constant, and this is again not giving us information about employment levels. And option C is saying output was greatest in the electricity supply industry, and the electricity supply industry we are seeing an increase in output per worker. It's basically providing output per worker, and these are giving percentage changes. It's not providing us absolute output levels, right? So we can't really determine the absolute output level from percentage changes alone, right? And so this statement would not be the correct option, and hence we are left with option number D as the correct answer. And this is actually the correct answer because it says workers became less efficient in the shipbuilding industry, and we see that in the shipbuilding industry, the output per worker goes down, which means that it decreased from 4% before to 1%, negative 1% of privatization, which indicates a decline in labor productivity or worker productivity, meaning workers became less efficient after privatization. Hence, option D is the correct answer. The next question 13 says most workers in a country are employed in the manufacturing sector where they are paid a fixed wage rate per hour. What will lead to an increase in the net advantage of workers currently employed in the manufacturing sector? The first option says reduction in working hours available. Now, from the face of this answer option, it seems like this is the correct answer, but then the fact that working hours are reduced, this could reduce workers' overall income unless and until you have some wage rate that is simultaneously increased, proportionately. And so, to some extent, yes, reducing working hours could provide some leisure time, but it would not necessarily increase the net advantage for workers, especially if it's reducing, the income or the earnings of the workers. So this is the incorrect answer. And part B says a shift in country's economy to the service sector. And if this would happen, it would create loss of jobs in the manufacturing sector, because creating structural unemployment in the manufacturing sector, and hence, again, negatively impacting the net advantage of workers, especially those who were in the manufacturing sector. This is also not the answer. Option C says subsidized lunch is made available. And obviously, if subsidized lunches are being available, so this is again non-monetary benefits for workers, because again, subsidized lunches would reduce the workers' expenses, daily expenses, and improving their overall welfare, and hence this makes sense, and option C should be the correct answer. The next question 14 says, when will a profit maximizing firm employ the optimum number of workers? This is such an easy question. We know that a profit maximizing firm would consider the relation between the MRP and the marginal cost of labor, right? And we know that the MRP is the additional revenue generated by employing one more unit of labor, while the marginal cost is the additional cost that is incurred by employing an extra worker. And so it follows that a profit maximizing firm will hire workers to the point where the MRP equals the marginal cost of hiring workers, right? Because beyond this point, hiring additional workers would result in the cost of hiring, exceeding the revenue generated by the labor, hence reducing the firm's overall profits. And so it follows that if you look at option C, when the MRP equals the marginal cost of hiring workers, so this is the correct condition for profit maximization, right? Because a firm will employ workers up to the point where the additional revenue that is generated by the last worker hired equals the additional cost of hiring that worker, and so it follows that C is the correct answer. The next question number 15, says the diagram shows the labor market for farm workers in New Zealand, and which area represents the economic rent and transfer earnings? Easy question. So we know that transfer earnings basically is the minimum reward that is required to keep the factors of production, such as labor in its current occupation, and this is basically shown by the area that is underneath the labor supply curve. And we know that the total earnings or total reward of labor equals the wage multiplied by the employment. And hence, if you look at if you want to find out the economic rent, it is basically any amount that is earned by a factor of production above the minimum amount that is required to work in a current occupation. And this area is basically shown below the wage and above the labor supply curve. And so it follows that this particular area, that is J, K, and G, is basically your economic rent, while this particular area, O, J, H, K, is basically your transfer earnings, right? That is GHOJ. And the total reward to the factor input would be the sum of the transfer earnings and economic rent. And so it follows that option D should be the correct answer. The next question number 16, says what is not a function of commercial bank? To help raise finance, to hold cash on deposit for firms. Holding cash on deposit on firms is definitely a function of commercial bank. Lending money to households is definitely a function. Providing a saving account is also a core function of commercial banks. And so what we are left with is A, right? To help firms raise finance. But let's see how is, even through elimination method, we can come to A. But let's see why is A the correct answer. Because it says to help firms raise finance. And here we need to understand the concept of finance. Because, now you guys must be confused that, oh, you know what, we've studied that commercial banks lend to firms as well, right? They loan out to firms to finance their own investments. Well, that's true. And providing loans to firms is a form or one form of financing. It is not the only form of financing, especially through issuance of equity and debt financing, equity financing and debt financing. This is not done by commercial banks, right? And so when we're talking about raising finance, right, we also include activities of the firms like issuing equity and debt in capital markets, which is not the role of commercial banks and has nothing to do with commercial banks here, right? It's more concerned with the role of investment banks, right? And so that makes A the correct answer. And so even if you didn't really think in that sense, that it's not the role, raising finance through issuing equity or debt is not the role of a commercial bank, even if you didn't think along those lines, right, still you could have come up with option A. The next question number 17, says in 2020 a country, the unemployment rate of 16 to 64 age group seeking work was 4%, employment rate was 76.6%. What can be concluded from this? Now guys, this question is a bit tricky question and it requires some mathematical working to prove the answer. Now for now, since you guys are just checking your answer, so the correct answer for this question is D for David. But I'm not going to be proving why is it D in this video. Since you're just checking your answers, I'm going to be making another video probably by tomorrow, and I'll prove it that why is D the correct answer according to me, right? So the correct answer should be David according to me, 17, that the data is inaccurate. Question number 18 says, which statement relating to unemployment benefits provided by the government is not valid? Option A says they allow firms to dismiss workers as unemployment benefits provide support to unemployed workers. Now, unemployment benefits we know can provide income for individuals and workers, so they provide a safety net for those workers who will be laid off, right? So if workers are made redundant, they're made unemployed, so yes, it will provide them with a safety net, which will sort of make it easier for firms to dismiss the workers during recessions and downturns without causing the workers immediate severe hardship. So it makes the decision easier for firms. Hence, this is the correct statement. Option B says they force firms to raise wages to encourage workers to work rather than relying on unemployment benefits. Now, unemployment benefits do not force the firms directly to raise wages because, so firms, yes, may need to offer, high wages, or you can say competitive market wages to attract workers, but this is influenced by market conditions rather than being a direct consequence of unemployment benefits, right? So unemployment benefits provide a temporary income for the unemployed, but they do not really force or compel firms to raise wages. So that makes B the correct answer. Question number 19 says country X has a marginal propensity to consume of 0.7. Its marginal propensity to save, MRT, and MPM are each 0.1. Okay, fine. Well and good. Now, obviously, because 1 minus MPC would give you MPW, which should be equal to 0.3, and so that comprises of marginal propensity to save, marginal propensity to tax, and marginal propensity to import. So the formula for the multiplier is 1 over 1 minus MPC, right, which is also equal to 1 over MPW. That comprises of your marginal propensity to withdraw, that comprises of your marginal propensity to save, marginal propensity to import, and marginal propensity to tax. And it follows that, your multiplier, the value of your multiplier will go up if your marginal propensity to consume goes up, right? And it follows that A should be the correct answer because, what's happening here is that a 5% increase in your marginal propensity to consume would directly lower down it would basically lower down the value of your MPW, right? And so it says together with a 5% fall in your MRT. Now, if this is going up by 5%, automatically the value of your MPW, that is marginal propensity to withdraw, goes down. And so the new marginal propensity to withdraw would automatically factor in the 5% fall in MRT, right? And hence, obviously, that would cause the biggest increase in your national income multiplier. And we can actually calculate the value of the multiplier as well. So since multiplier is 1 over 1 minus MPC, just a second, 1 over 1 minus MPC, which is equal to 1 over MPW. And so if your MPC is going up by 5%, right now it's 0.75. And so it would mean that your new so let's see what the multiplier is right now. And so the multiplier right now would be 1 over 1 minus MPC, that is 0.3, which is equal to your MPW. So currently the multiplier is 1 over 0.3, and that is 3.33. This is your multiplier right now. And so if the MPC goes up by 5%, then it would be 1 over 1 minus what is the new MPC. The new MPC would be, 105% of 0.7, and that should come up to 0.735. So 1 minus 0.735, 1 minus 0.735, right? 735. Okay, my mind is not working right now. Just a second, I'm so sorry. 0.735. And so 1 minus 0.735, that should be 0.265. So 1 over the answer would be 3.77. So the new multiplier would be 3.77. And so let's see that, if you look at option number B, C, and D, so whatever will happen in option B, the same would be applicable for option C and D, because a 5% increase in MPM or a 5% increase in MPS or MRT with another 5% fall in either MRT or either of MPM or MPS would give you the same results, right? Because MPM, MRT, and MPS are all equal to MPW. I mean, the total MPW, right? And so if you look at option B, it says the 5% increase in, and so right now my MPW, that is my MPM, which is 0.1, my marginal propensity to tax is also 0.1, and my marginal propensity to save is also 0.1, sum up to 0.3, that is MPW. And hence they are saying that a 5% increase in MPM, so this should be equal to, the new MPM should be into 105%, that is 0.1 into 1.05, and that would give me how much? 0.105, right? And the MRT, that is marginal propensity to tax, it sort of falls by 5%, and so it would mean that it would be 95% of 0.1, and hence it would be equal to 0.095, right? 0.095, and this should be equal to, it's the same as 0.1, and so the new MPW would be 0.105 plus 0.095 plus 0.1, and hence the new MPW would be 0.3, which is the same as the old MPW, and hence the value of the multiplier would still come up to 3.33, because what's really happening here is that a rise in a 5% increase in MPW is basically offset by a 5% fall in MRT, leaving the MPW unaffected, and hence leaving the multiplier really unaffected as well. And so it follows that A is the correct answer. The next question number 20, is an interesting question. It says the diagram shows the performance of an economy using different measures. And so if the economy is currently at point X on each diagram, what is most likely conclusion that can be based on this evidence? So looking at all the three diagrams, you need to come up to conclusion. And if you look at the first diagram, the first diagram is showing a point that is inside the curve, indicating underutilization of resources and economic inefficiency. And this is suggesting that the economy is not at its full potential. It's away from full employment, because on the production possibility curve, on the macro PPC, the economy is operating at full employment. And same goes for diagram 2 as well. We can clearly see that the economy is away from full employment, suggesting that we have a negative output gap, right? And this is again an indication of a recession, right? Or we have a recessionary gap here, right? And so the third diagram is showing that point X is below the actual growth is below your trend or your potential GDP, which means that the actual growth is below your potential GDP. Again, this is supporting that we have a deflationary or a negative output gap here. So the correct answer for this question should be option number C, that the economy is currently experiencing a deflationary gap, because this sort of is consistent with what we can see on the above three diagrams, right guys? So C is the correct answer. Now question number 21 says which row correctly identifies the characteristics of an economy that is experiencing a liquidity trap. Now liquidity trap, guys, is basically a situation when your interest rates are very, very low, but still they fail to stimulate aggregate demand in the economy, and your saving rates are very high, and your traditional monetary policy just becomes ineffective. People are basically preferring to hold cash rather than invest in bonds or other assets. And so if you look at these, if you look at the following three characteristics that are present, so the rate of economic growth in a liquidity trap is very, very slow. So despite the fact that your interest rates are very low in the economy, because your monetary policy just fails over there. So even reducing interest rates doesn't really have an effect. It's characterized in, liquidity traps usually occur in deep recessions, and so interest rates are very low. Yes, interest rates are low, very low, close to zero, and even a further reduction to it won't really stimulate spending or investments. So AD is very low. And inflation rate is also very low, because obviously it's indicating that your aggregate demand is very low in the economy, so inflation is very low as well. And your rate of economic growth is also very low. So the correct option according to this should be option number C, and hence C is the correct answer. Question number 22 says, which combination of policies would be most likely to bring a country out of recession? And so the first option says expansionary fiscal and monetary as well as supply side, and this sort of makes sense because expansionary fiscal and monetary or expansionary demand side policies will stimulate aggregate demand, helping the economy out of recession, as well as supply side policies, both short-term and long-term supply side policy, would also help the economy bring out of recession, and especially recessions that are associated from the supply side, right? And that makes A the correct answer. Question number 23 says, the inflation rate in a country increase, which effect would this likely have on a country's balance of payment? And so option A is saying, an improvement in the current account position, and this is unlikely because higher inflation would worsen the current account balance, because exports would go down as they would become uncompetitive, and imports would become cheaper. Relatively cheaper as compared to domestic goods. So A is not the answer. An increase in price competitiveness, this is also not the answer, because your prices, your domestic goods would become uncompetitive as your price competitiveness will not increase. As higher domestic prices will basically reduce the price competitiveness as domestic because of inflation. And so option C says an increase in export revenue. This is also not correct, because obviously your export revenues should go down because domestic prices are going up, so this will reduce the exports will become uncompetitive. While an increase in import expenditure is more likely, because because of inflation, it will make imported goods relatively cheaper and increasing the demand for imports, hence increasing your import expenditure. So that makes D the correct answer. Question number 24 says, the government uses monetary and fiscal policy to solve the problem of deflation. Which policy combination is likely to be more successful? Very easy question. The correct answer for this should be D for David, because reducing interest rates is an expansionary monetary policy along with expansionary fiscal policy. Both would corroborate each other to stimulate aggregate demand and bring the economy out of recession. Hence D is the correct answer. Question number 25 says, the table shows indicators from macroeconomies of 2 South American countries over a year, and during this year both the governments are trying to reduce unemployment by expanding AD. Based on the information, what is most likely reason why Argentina achieved a higher percentage change in unemployment rate than Chile? Okay, Argentina had a greater percentage change in GDP growth. That's first option. Now, you see, Argentina's GDP growth rate is slightly higher than that compared to Chile's, right? And this could be possibly a reason that could contribute a difference in unemployment changes. But then the thing is that, this difference in GDP growth as compared is, relatively small, 17.9 and 17.2%. And this will not really fully explain, the difference. Although this does make sense, but then this is not the best answer, because this will not fully explain, why there is, a significant difference in unemployment rate changes. That's what we're trying to find out, because the question is saying, based on the information, what is the most likely region where Argentina has achieved a higher percentage change in unemployment rate as compared to Chile's, right? If you look at option number B, it says Chile's performance on the current account balance was worse. And so we know that Argentina has a positive current account balance that is 1.7% of your GDP, while your Chile is negative. It's a negative current account balance, right? Because it's negative 1.8% of your GDP. And a positive current account balance would indicate that, Argentina is more exporting more than what it is importing. That is contributing to economic growth, and not only economic growth, and obviously it will contribute to job creation as well, and that could potentially explain the difference. And in contrast, you have a negative current account balance that is indicating for Chile's, that is indicating a higher import than exports. That will obviously result in decline of domestic industries, potentially leading to job losses or less job creation, and that would perfectly explain why there is, a difference. And so what it follows is then the most likely reason why Argentina achieved a higher percentage change in the unemployment rate than that of Chile is due to their differences in the performance on the current account balance, right? And so option B is the correct answer. The next question number 26, says a measure encourages consumers to change spending on imports to spending on domestic produced goods. What does this describe? Expenditure reducing, switching, law of... This is a pretty simple question. The correct answer should be B, because expenditure switching policy is aimed at, changing it switches the expenditure of spending from foreign to domestic goods, right? So B should be the correct answer. Question 27 says the macroeconomic objective of a government is to move the current account of the balance of payment from deficit to surplus. To achieve this, it devalues the currency. Under which condition would a devaluation... Okay, so we know very well that as devaluation would be successful if the Marshall-Lerner condition is met, because that is very effective. I mean, the Marshall-Lerner condition would determine the effectiveness of the currency devaluation, and the Marshall-Lerner condition states that a currency devaluation will only improve trade balance if the sum of price elasticities of demand for imports and exports is greater than 1, and hence A should be the correct answer. The next question 28, says a multinational company buys a manufacturing firm in a developing country that produces goods for the developing country's domestic producers. And the MNC then exports machinery and raw materials that it needs to the developing country. What is the most likely consequence of this FDI by the MNC on the BOP of the developing country? And so the financial account would definitely improve, because the financial account is recording transactions that involve the acquisition or the disposal of assets, and it also, the FDI that takes place is recorded in the financial account, and so this would be recorded as an inflow, and hence when the multinational invests in the developing country, it would bring capital into the country, improving the financial account of the developing country. So it could be either A or C. But the current account would worsen, because the current account is recording the trade balance, it records the net primary income, the net secondary income. And if the MNC exports basically machinery and raw material to a developing country, it means that the developing country is importing. So it will increase the imports of the developing country, again worsening the current account balance. So option C would be the correct answer. Question number 29 says a table gives information about the population of 3 countries in a given year. So you have birth rate per 1,000, death rate per 1,000, infant mortality rate, and the percentage of population under 16. Which conclusion can be drawn about the countries in the table in that year? Now, if you look at option number B, it says people in Hong Kong lived the longest. Now, you see, to determine the life expectancy, we would look at the death rate, but Hong Kong's death rate 6 per 1,000, right? So it's higher than Singapore's 4 per 1,000. So people in Hong Kong then did not live the longest, as the option is saying. And let's say option number D, it says the population of Singapore was expected to fall in the next 5 years, and we don't really have enough data to predict the future population trends. And option number C is saying Singapore had the largest number of people aged over 16. Now the percentage of the population that is under 16 is given in the table, and we can see that, but we don't really have the total population. It's a percentage of the population under 16, but we don't really have the total population, so we can't really determine the absolute number of people over 16, because it's saying Singapore had the largest number of people over 16. Now we can't really determine that, right? But option A is saying China had the highest percentage of children who died in infancy, and this should be the answer, because infant mortality rate, you can see, is the highest in China. That is 28 per 1,000. That is indicating the highest percentage of children who died in infancy, right? So that makes A the correct answer. Okay guys, the last question 30 says during a certain period, a country with a constant population expands its output per head. It also experiences a significant increase in river and atmospheric pollution, and in the absence of any other changes, which measure would show a decrease in living standards? Now, you see, if you look at these answer options, if you look at option number D, it says measure of economic welfare. And this measure basically takes into account not only the output, that is the economic output, but also, that is the GDP, but also the environmental quality and other factors that could potentially affect living standards. And since we know that pollution negatively impacts living standards, so what it follows is that the measure that would reflect this decrease most accurately would be the measure of economic welfare, making option D the correct answer. So guys, that's it. I wish you all the best of luck for your upcoming results in August, and you guys can now discuss the paper in the comments below. Until then, take care.